What's up everybody, it's Chris Toro. So I just saw A Quiet Place. I wanted to see this movie for a while because it looked unique and unlike any movie I've seen before, with its premise being you can't make any noise or mysterious monsters will get you. That idea wasn't the only thing that attracted me to this movie, it's the fact that these people look like they knew what they were doing. They soundproofed their house, took measures to make sure they didn't make any noise whatsoever, adapted and spoke sign language to each other. All in all, this movie seemed very smart, and the characters in it seemed interesting too, even though they weren't speaking. But unfortunately, there are tons of things in this movie that don't correlate, like the fact that there's a waterfall where you can make as much noise as you want. Jim and his son, I'm calling him Jim because they never tell us his name, they go to a waterfall and start yelling just to get out some energy, and he explains to his son how small noises don't have an effect around the waterfall or even the river, and his son seemed confused, as if his father never told him that before, like the concept of the waterfall and river being new to him. And that's the first scene where I thought, that doesn't make any sense. If there's a waterfall where you can even scream and get away with it, why doesn't the family just live near the waterfall or even the river? So in this movie, a quiet place means death. So the family decides to live in the most quiet place possible in the middle of nowhere. I guess they wanted the whole Western American dream. The family decides to live in a farm surrounded by a cornfield. These monsters are attracted to sound, and a cornfield makes the most noise when you're in it. So pretty much the cornfield is there to not go near it. It's like the family wanted a recipe for disaster. And this movie takes place during 3 days. And during those 3 days, so many things go wrong. After their son dies at the beginning for being a careless kid, basically being a normal kid, the whole family goes through grief. And the thing is, kids are notorious for not listening. So to be honest, I wasn't really surprised that the kid decided to pick up that truck anyway. I'm not even sure if the kid understood sign language. But after their son dies, Jim and his wife decide to do something. They decide to have a baby. And here's the thing, before I saw the movie, I didn't know the mother was going to have another kid. If I did know that, I wouldn't have gone to watch it. The action of raising a child in that world is something I know is going to fail. They did take some precautions, like making another basement and having some kind of coffin thing with what I assume to be helium to gas the baby up so it can sleep. So their big idea was to make a basement to raise the child, put it in a box, and gas it up. That's why I wish I knew they were going to have a kid before I started watching this movie, because that alone is kind of inhumane, and the box wasn't exactly noise-proof either. It just had a flimsy cover on top of it that barely reduced the baby's crying. But here's the thing, there was a waterfall where Jim and his son could scream, but not once did they think, why don't we raise the kid near the waterfall? Because babies are notorious for crying, screaming, burping, all that noisy stuff. And not once did the mother or father think to raise the kid near a waterfall. John, I'm talking to you. What were you thinking with this movie? The idea was great, but everything else just doesn't make any sense. But it's the actions this family takes during these consecutive 3 days, like with the daughter just leaving her pregnant mom alone. She's the oldest. I know the father said there's nobody to blame, but she's the oldest. I think you can legally blame her for leaving her pregnant mom alone. And near the end, when the father dies, first of all, he leaves his gun at the house when trying to look for his kids. It wasn't until the very end that we find out that shotguns are actually effective. So at that point it made sense not to bring a shotgun, but at the same time, would the axe that he carried do any better? The father is the person who wrote down the attributes for the monster, the attributes being blind and armored. So this genius brings an axe to fight an armored monster instead of the shotgun that he had at the house. He had plenty of time to prep before going and getting his kids, but he decided to wing it and just grab a random axe. Once again, in these 3 days, everyone just loses their minds and all common sense goes out the window. If I was going to look for my 2 kids, I would bring my shotgun at least, if it's a crazy person or if it's a giant monster. So the best thing he could do in that situation, of course, was sacrifice himself, because his kids start making a lot of noise. And once again, the core of the problem is the kids. And my question again is, why would you have more kids when you're literally dying because of them? It's not their fault, but they are a problem and they might die any day. So in a way, by having a child in that world, you're effectively killing them. All I'm saying is, it just takes a hanger. If the dad could figure out how to make a higher frequency hearing aid for his daughter, he can figure out how to do a procedure for the baby. So let's talk about that high frequency ending. So I'm assuming there's a government in this world. None of the scientists in that government figured out that these monsters with sensitive super hearing could by chance be susceptible to high frequency sounds like a dog. Dogs have been around for a long time. Dogs are very susceptible to high frequency. So when there's a creature that can hear even the smallest sound, not once did a scientist think, hey, that's like a dog or a cat, so they should respond to high frequency in the same way that a dog or a cat responds to it. But it took a little girl with a hearing aid and a mom that stepped on a nail to figure this out, opposed to government scientists. I'm assuming there's no real government in that world, and just a bunch of news stations to tell people what to do. They just printed out instructions to stay quiet, opposed to any other kind of effort. Now, I generally try to enjoy a movie, but these were such big things that I'm probably not going to ever enjoy this movie again. The waterfall was introduced almost at the beginning of the film. If the father knew about that, he could have brought his baby boy to play with his truck at the waterfall. And also at the end, if a shotgun could affect the creature enough that it kills it with one shot, I'm assuming they never shot at those creatures before. But if bullets can affect those creatures, why have they taken over the entire world? If bullets can affect these monsters, there's no chance that his exoskeleton was weakened by the high frequency. That's impossible. Think about it this way. If there's a zombie apocalypse film and there's an area in the world that has no infection, and during the beginning of the film, someone brings somebody else to that area and says, oh, there's no infection here, it's like paradise, and then they consciously go right back into the infection and the post-apocalyptic world just to make a movie out of it, wouldn't you feel like it's not a case of the world is a threat, but it's the main character's own stupidity that is kind of the enemy in the movie? If there's a place you could just go to any time to escape all the dangers in the world and you don't go there, it's your fault, isn't it? The director should have at least not put that part in the movie. And also at the end, I'm just going to assume that they all died. It was such a terrible ending. There were tons of monsters coming at the family. They were trapped in a basement with a speaker. It's not like they had surround sound. They just had this one speaker and there were like 8 monsters coming at them. All the monsters are super fast. So there's a big chance that the monsters could go down to the basement, hear the high frequency. One of the monsters, just like the first one, could start swinging around or maybe even throw himself at the speaker, breaking it. Or another scenario, they can use the high frequency. The mom gets a good Angelina Jolie from Wanted shot in and curves the bullet, shoots 3 of them in a row. But there's still 5. She perfectly shoots all of them, but still runs out of shotgun shells. So they're forced to leave the basement, but are most likely met by monsters at the door. And since the high frequency does affect them, but also attracts them, chances are when they're done with those 8, there's more coming. So it is safe to assume that they just all died at the end. And it's totally all their fault. They could have just went to the waterfall, raised their kid there. And in a world like that, beggars can't be choosers. I would gladly live under a waterfall if it means I can live a normal life. After that scene where a bunch of monsters were making their way to the house and she just glocked her gun like Alice from Resident Evil, I just laughed and cringed a little bit. I'm not sure what the movie ended up being, but it was nowhere close to being as smart as I thought it was, because it's not smart. It pretends to be. And let me know what you guys think about A Quiet Place. See you guys in the next video. Later.